Hello children, welcome to the geography class. So in this class, we shall discuss about the remaining part of the chapter, that is chapter 11, water resources. So children, let's start with irrigation. In India, about 65% of the total population is directly or indirectly dependent upon agriculture, and water is an important input for growing crops. Water is made available to the agricultural fields either by rainfall or by human efforts, that is, through various means of irrigation. Irrigation refers to the process of watering of agricultural plants through artificial means from wells, tanks, tube wells, canals, etc. Presently, about 92% of the water is used for agriculture, 2% for industries, and 6% for drinking and domestic purposes. Under this situation, it is imperative to use artificial means to raise crops. In India, irrigation has been practicing from ancient times. A number of artificial lakes and canals that dot the country are centuries old, and some of them have served for more than 1,000 years. The Grand Aqueduct, built across the river Kaveri during the 2nd century AD, and the two big tanks in Chingalpur district of Tamil Nadu, constructed in 8th and 9th century AD, are the two examples of artificial lakes and canals in the ancient times. After India attained independence and began plant development, the increase in irrigation potential was regarded as one of the prerequisites for agricultural development in the country. The following reasons justify the need of artificial application of water through irrigation to land. First one, uncertainty of rainfall. The rainfall in India is highly irregular in the place and time. The rainfall is not regular throughout the rainy season, leading to the water scarcity and withering of the crops. Hence, irrigation is the only means to supplement rainwater to raise crops. Next reason is uneven distribution of rainfall. In India, the distribution of rainfall is quite uneven because 80% of the rainfall is from southwest monsoon, and it often fails to keep its date. Some places receives heavy rainfall, while the other places receives very scanty or meager rainfall. This inadequacy of rainfall has led to the scarcity of water, and that has to be met by irrigation. Next is crop requirements. Different crops require different quantities of water for their growth. Some crops which are grown in winter, that is Rabi crops, need artificial supply of water when there is hardly any rainfall in most parts. While some crops such as rice, sugar, jute, cotton and chilies need more water and hence need to be provided with irrigation. Next is nature of the soil. The water requirement of different crops depends on the nature of the soil. For example, clayey soils have higher moisture holding capacity and therefore requires less irrigation. On the other hand, the sandy loams have less moisture retentive capacity and requires more irrigation. Next is to utilize river water effectively. Many rivers in India are not perennial. The rivers of central and southern India have water for 4 months of monsoon rains and remains largely dry during the 8 months of the year. Therefore, to effectively utilize the water of these rivers, means of irrigation have to be used. Lastly, to maximize production. To obtain maximum production, irrigation is must. According to agricultural scientists, the production of irrigated crops is more than the unirrigated crops in the same area. Based on the availability of surface and groundwater, topography, soils and climatic conditions, different means of irrigation are utilized in India. Irrigation can be broadly classified into two: conventional method It is also called as primitive method of irrigation and modern method of irrigation. The conventional means of irrigation includes wells, tanks, and inundation canals, whereas modern method of irrigation includes furrow irrigation, drip irrigation, spray irrigation, and sprinkler irrigation. Now let's discuss about wells. Irrigation by wells has been the age-old method supplying water for domestic purpose, agriculture, and drinking. About 40% of irrigated area in India is under well irrigation. A well is a small hole dug in the surface of the earth to obtain water from the water table for irrigation and other purposes. Wells are of two types: surface well and tube wells. Surface wells are again divided into two types: lined well and unlined well. Unlined wells are also known as kacha wells. Such wells are normally constructed where the water table is high. These are not lined by bricks or cement. These are cheaper to dig and are essentially used for irrigation. Whereas lined wells are also called as pakka wells and are lined with cement or bricks and are mostly covered and safe for supplying drinking water as well as for supply of water for domestic purposes and irrigating the farms. Now let's see what are the favorable conditions required to dig the well. First one, the water table should be high. Well irrigation is practiced in the areas where plenty of groundwater is available and the depth of the water table does not exceed 15 meters. Wells are dug in the middle of the area to be irrigated and at a place which is relatively at a high level. Second, the ground should have soft rocks. That means well irrigation is confined mainly to the alluvial plains, where owing to the soft nature of the soil, wells can be easily dug. Third, dig the wells along river beds. That means the presence of perennial rivers ensures the water table is recharged. The water from the wells is lifted for irrigation in number of ways, and they are Persian wheel method, lever method, and inclined plane method. Now let's learn about Persian wheel method. The Persian wheel is a mechanical water lifting device. It is mainly used in Punjab, Haryana and western Rajasthan. It is a partly submerged vertical wheel with buckets attached to the rim. As the wheel is turned by draught animals rotating a geared horizontal wheel, the buckets are filled and emptied in a trough above, which carries the water to the crop-sown fields. It is traditionally known as Rahat system of irrigation. Now let's learn about lever method. It is used in Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. It is very economical and efficient method of lifting water from shallow wells to a height of 3.5 to 4.5 meters. The lift consists of a strong log laid across a fulcrum, a bucket attached to the long arm by means of bamboo or a rope, and a heavy weight attached to the other side of the log. When the bucket is full, one person gently releases the rope and the bucket comes up as the stone goes down. The bucket is emptied into the field and again lowered into the well. Now let's see the inclined plane method. This method is also known as mahot. In this type, a pair of bullocks move down from the slopes, especially constructed from the wall of the well. A bucket or a leather bag which is discharged into the connecting channel pulling from behind. The rope goes through the pulley in this process. After discharging the water, the bullocks walk up to the slope until they reach the top, by which by which time the bucket reaches the surface of the water and gets filled. Now let's see the advantages of well irrigation. Low cost. A well which can be dug at very low cost is the simplest and the cheapest source of irrigation. The farmers in India can easily afford to have a private well in his field. Second, no extra cost. The bullocks which are used for plowing the farmland can be used for lifting water from the well, and the farmers do not incur any extra cost for the same. Use of pumps. By the use of pumps and tube wells, water can be lifted even from the great heights. Now let's see the disadvantages of well irrigation. Distribution varies. That means the efficiency of a well depends on the availability of groundwater, which varies not only from place to place but also from season to season. Difficult to dig. It is not possible to dig wells in the areas of hard rocks or in the hilly region. Lowering underground water table. When we take out excessive water from a well, the water table is lowered, which can adversely affect the farming in the surrounding areas. Groundwater is brackish. In many areas, the groundwater is brackish in taste and thus not suitable for irrigating the farmlands. Now let's discuss about tube wells. Nowadays, tube wells are the most popular source of irrigation in India. The first tube well was probably sunk in Uttar Pradesh in 1930. At present, more than 5 million tube wells are operating in different parts of India. A tube well is a deeper well at a depth of 20 to 30 meters from which water is lifted up with the help of power-driven pumps. It is also known as lift method. The following factors favors the installation of tube wells for irrigation. First one, availability of plenty of water. There should be enough groundwater because a tube well can irrigate about 100 hectares of farmland against 5 hectares by an ordinary surface well. Level land and soft soil for the tube well to be set up. Large fertile land. The soil should be fertile so that it can give high yield and enough production from the farmland to meet the cost of irrigation by a tube well. Cheap electricity. The power for running the pumps should be available at subsidized rates. This can help the lifting of the groundwater as and when required for irrigating the farmland. Following are the advantages of tube wells. It is an independent source of irrigation. It brings up clean water. It can irrigate large area of agricultural land. It is easier to bring up large amount of water in a short period of time. It is a perennial means of irrigation as it is drilled up to the permanent water table. Now let's see the disadvantages of tube well. Excessive use of tube well water can lead to depletion of groundwater. It is useless if the water is brackish. It is expensive as it requires continuous supply of electricity. Tube wells are used in the northern plains in the states of Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Bihar, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and West Bengal.